Welcome back to This is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to be talking about Commander Tough Rules and Cool Interactions, episode 154. Today's episode is going to be a continuation of the Combat Phase miniseries, my longest running miniseries, and this time I'll be focusing on attack requirements and attack restrictions, specifically in dealing with the Goad mechanic. I actually was working on this episode covering a lot more, but after I got done just writing up the stuff on Goad, it was already a couple pages long, so next week will be part 6. So let's get started. Before we get to Goad, let's define restrictions and requirements. And for that, we will take a look first at CR 508.1c that says, the active player checks each creature they control to see whether it's affected by any restrictions. Effects that say a creature can't attack or that it can't attack unless some condition is met. If any restrictions are being disobeyed, the declaration of attackers is illegal. And then, for requirements, we will take a look at CR 508.1d that says, the active player checks each creature they control to see whether it's affected by any requirements. Effects that say a creature attacks if able, or that it attacks if some condition is met. If the number of requirements that are being obeyed is fewer than the maximum possible number of requirements that could be obeyed without disobeying any restrictions, the declaration of attackers is illegal. And there's a little bit more, but we'll get to that later. So basically, this boils down to you have to obey all of the restrictions, and you must satisfy as many of the requirements that you can without conflicting with any restriction. This is very hyperbolic and very generalized, but let's say there were 3 attack restrictions and 15 attack requirements. Probably never going to happen in a game, but whatever. If there was an attack that you could make that would satisfy only one requirement while not conflicting with any of the 3 restrictions, and then a different attack that you could make but would satisfy 10 of the requirements but would conflict with just one of the 3 restrictions, the only legal one that you could make is the one that only satisfies one of those requirements. That math might not make entire sense yet, but hopefully by the end of this episode and episode 6, it will make a lot more sense. So now let's see an example of a restriction, and the card that I showed last week that inspired this episode will work, and that is Silent Arbiter, which has 2 abilities that say no more than 1 creature can attack each combat, and then there's also that no more than 1 creature can block each combat part. Both of these are restrictions. The effects restrict what the attacker is able to do, and they restrict what the defending player is able to do. Now, on to a requirement, and that is where goading comes in. Goad has become pretty popular over the last few years as WotC has printed it on more and more cards, and Disrupt Decorum is still one of the most popular Goad cards out there, seeing play even in non-Goad focused decks. It simply says that you goad all creatures you don't control. When a creature is goaded, we can see in CR 701.38b that a goaded creature attacks each combat if able and attacks a player other than the controller of the permanent, spell, or ability that caused it to be goaded if able. And while it may look like that second part of that is a restriction for saying who it can't attack, it's actually worded in such a way that it is a requirement for whom it must attack. Is that whom or who? Whatever. And you'll notice that there's the use of the words if able for both of these. There are a lot of misunderstandings about Goad, so let's clear up some of them. Here's a scenario. If your Death Touch creature is goaded, can you politic with a player who's low on health but has a very big blocker to get a safe and unblocked swing to their planeswalker so that they and their creature will still be alive, and also your attacking creature will still be alive. You're not attacking the controller of the effect that did the goading, so this should work, right, if you're attacking not that goading player. Sadly, no, you cannot do this. When we look at the actual effect of Goad again, we can see that it doesn't say that you can't attack the player who goaded it, but it specifically says you must attack another player other than the one that goaded you. So you wouldn't be able to go at the Planeswalker or even something like a battle if one of those were to be out. You actually do have to attack another player. Another thing about Goad is that a creature can indeed be goaded by multiple different players, and if that happens, you're setting up multiple combat requirements. If you are player A and both players B and C have goaded your same creature, then you will likely be having to attack player D. But what if player D has also goaded that same creature? Now we get into something trickier. It's at this point that a weakness of Goad is shown, the use of the words "if able." So now the goaded creature does still have to attack, and if no restrictions are out, like Moat or Peacekeeper, then that goaded creature is able to attack. But all three players have goaded it, so the creature must attack another player, a different one, but there is no other player. There's no fifth player that the creature could attack. So now it is unable to attack a different player. It's been goaded by everybody, but it is still able to attack, and so that is a requirement that can still be satisfied. And now you have free range pick of who you would like to attack. This is also why Goad is such a hard deck to win with, because once you get down to a 1v1, you can always be attacked by your opponent's creatures that you've goaded. What about a similar situation? If your player A and player B goads your creature, and then players C and D both have a propaganda type effect out, then when you go to combat, you do actually have access to plenty of mana, way more than is needed to pay for the attack. Then do you have to pick which propaganda player you will attack? Goad says if able, and you are able to make that payment. Crazy enough, you don't have to make that payment. And that is the other part of that crazy amount of text that I showed earlier. It is also part of CR 508.1d and says, if a creature can't attack unless a player pays a cost, that player is not required to pay that cost, even if attacking with that creature would increase the number of requirements being obeyed. And so you can choose not to pay the attack on players C or D, in which case your goaded creature still has a requirement to attack if able, and so you can attack player B just as if C and D were dead or had goaded as well, like in the previous example. One last thing I'll cover with Goad here in Part 5. If I were to cast Disrupt Decorum, and then on your turn, during your pre-combat main phase, you kill me somehow, so that you don't have to swing your whole board. But that actually won't work. Yes, in the game, if a player is removed from the game, then any continuous effects that they controlled leaves with them, like if I were to have gained control of a creature of yours, and you wanted that creature back, you could kill me to get your creature back. However, goaded is just a designation applied to the creature, not a continuous effect. Think of it similar to if I cast a Toxic Deluge and I paid 5 life into it, and then in that same turn, you wanted your 6/6 creature to go back to being a 6/6 creature rather than the now 1/1 from the Toxic Deluge. You killing me will not make that happen. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. Part 6 will continue to dive further into more of these requirements and restrictions that can make attacking and blocking a nightmare to try to figure out. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta!